Hello, welcome back to my channel. After taking an unintentional hiatus, I am back with another video, and this one will be a tag video. I was tagged about a couple months ago by a creator, Melly in the Margins. Shout out to her. This tag is called the Reading Shifts tag. It's about how your reading habits and the books you read have changed over time, and there is a series of 7 questions. So without further ado, I will begin. The first question is, how has your reading developed over your lifetime? Do the kinds of books that bring you the most pleasure now differ from the books you loved most earlier in your life? If you've seen big changes in your reading since you've matured, what might explain your changing interests? Well, so to answer the first question, a lot of these questions are like 3 questions in one. I did start out reading naturally middle grade books, YA books, and then around the time I was probably a junior or senior in high school, I switched to reading books that are for adults. I feel like in some ways my taste has changed, but in some ways there are really striking parallels. When I was a kid, I definitely was into books that featured animals in some way. I have talked about this in one of my previous videos. I think it was the Booktube newbie tag that I loved reading horse books. So like Black Stallion, Misty of Chincoteague, all that. Anything featuring animals was something I loved. And that was also the case with like the films I watched. I was obsessed with like 101 Dalmatians and The Lion King. I think for a long period of time, when I was in my 20s, I was really into fiction that was grounded in reality. So not anything that was at all fantastical or speculative. And I would say more recently, at least within the past 5 years, I have opened up to reading more genres that are not strictly grounded in reality, like in a world that is ours, essentially, or literary fiction. I've enjoyed books that are magical realism, which was not something I used to. When I was in college, I really did not care for magical realism, and I think it was just the books I happened to read that were magical realism just didn't jive with me. Like Water for Chocolate was one book. I did not care for it. I remember reading 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which I also was not a fan of. And so reading those 2 books just turned me off from it for a while. But I've become a lot more open to it, especially within the past couple years. Same with things that are speculative. One book that I think years ago I never would have thought I loved was Severance by Ling Ma, which is kind of like an apocalyptic pandemic zombie story, which, again, I never would have liked. So my taste has changed in terms of being more open to reading across genres or books that at least utilize concepts from different genres. I would say that in some ways my taste has remained the same in terms of historical fiction, or having an interest in reading about other cultures, or having an interest in books that are primarily grounded from a woman's perspective or feature a female character. Those are things I've noticed that I was always drawn to from a young age, and I still feel like I maintain those interests. Second question, do you find yourself choosing different kinds of books at different periods of the year? For example, do the seasons affect what you read for pleasure? Similarly, might you read very different kinds of books while on vacation? So I never felt that I chose different kinds of books at different periods of the year until I started Booktube. And so last year in October and November, I did actually read a lot of horror-themed books for the season, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was very fitting, and I would actually do that again. I don't know if I really do that, though, for any other season or time of year. And then in terms of might I read very different kinds of books but on vacation, not really. I just read what I want to read. Like, I remember years ago reading The Devil's Chessboard, which is about the CIA's early activities. I remember sitting on the beach and reading that. It's not really like a beach read, you'd think. But like, so yeah, when I'm on vacation, it doesn't really matter. Although I will say one example. Okay, so a couple years ago, I went with a friend to Puerto Rico and I didn't have any books to read. And in the airport, this was actually not in Puerto Rico, there was Olga Dies Dreaming, which is about Puerto Rico, a Puerto Rican woman and the colonization of Puerto Rico, like within a modern context. So that was actually a book that really meshed well with my vacation. Question number 3. Do specific experiences in your life ever shape what you choose to read? For example, did you read obsessively about child rearing when your kids were little, about gardening as spring is about to begin, and about the experience of grief when someone you love died? I don't know if that affects the books I read. I mean, it definitely affects maybe sometimes the media I consume or like what I'm reading online or interest. But in terms of like the books I read, I'm not sure if that's really affected. I mean, I go through phases where I like get an interest in a specific topic and then I will read about it, like zero in on it. But I don't know if that really corresponds to certain experiences in my life. Sometimes I think it might correspond to like current events that I want to know and educate myself about, but I don't know if it's like really correlates to like specific experiences within my personal life. Question number 4. Have there been any times in your life when circumstances have limited or changed your reading in some way, perhaps caretaking responsibilities or a big move that made it hard to find as much time to read as you'd like, or personal illness that made it harder to concentrate, or maybe just long-term travel that might have limited your book choices? How do you deal with those circumstances? I mean, yes, of course. Personal stuff in your life always does limit or change your reading. I mean, for me lately, these past couple of years, I found that I've been greatly affected sometimes just by current events, and then I start doom scrolling, and then I'm like unable to concentrate and read. So yeah, that is one thing, because I'm just spending all my time staring at my phone and not actually reading a book. I mean, anytime like something traumatic, you could say, happens, like, I don't know, like a personal loss in your family, or just the like work. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely affected my reading. But there's other ways too that like I've gone through phases where I wasn't even really into reading. I was maybe more into unwinding by watching TV shows. So yeah, it kind of ebbs and flows. 5. Booktube is full of discussions of reading slumps, when dedicated readers seem to lose interest for a while in books. Sometimes they just can't find a book that appeals to them. Have you ever experienced a slump? If so, how did you handle it? If not, do you have any advice to give people who are experiencing slumps? I mean, I think this kind of piggybacks off of the previous question. Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I don't even know if it's really a slump. I feel like people in Booktube, we just take reading so seriously. It's just, again, I think it just comes down to like what you're interested in and what you have time for, and if you're even interested in consuming books, or if maybe you are just more in the mood to watch TV. I mean, I feel like I went through a slump, but that was just more recently, just because what I was reading was getting quite dry. The specific book I was reading, and I was upset by current events. So I would say that one of the biggest causes, I think, for a reading slump for me, and I think other people can relate, is when I become addicted to looking at my phone, doing whatever I am doing on my phone. So I think it's good to maybe put your phone away in another room or always check and see how many hours you're on your phone, because then I will shame myself and be like, I have to put this down. And I would say that, you know, if you're reading a book and it's not clicking with you, don't feel bad about DNFing it. Like, there's so many other books that you could be reading that you could be getting pleasure from. And even if you DNF it, you can come back and pick it up again later on. Like, who cares, you know? There was another book I was recently reading, and it just wasn't clicking with me. I was like, I'm not in the mood to read the sort of tone and topics that the author, it was Eve Babbitt's Black Swans. I'll probably come back to it at some point, but reading about rich people in LA in the 80s just was not the mood I was going for. So my advice is to put down the phone, check your screen time so you're aware. And if the book you're reading is just not interesting, then pick up something else that is interesting. Now, question number 6 is booktubers also talk about book hangovers, when readers are so moved by a book that they find it difficult to move on to a new book. Have you ever felt this way? I actually don't think so. I know what people are talking about. I've heard of that on Booktube, and I've not had that experience. There's sometimes I'll finish a book that is deeply moving and I want to like let it marinate maybe, but I don't think that my expectations have become then so high that like other books don't compare, unless it's like a similar topic that the book is about, right? But in general, I don't know if I really pit like books against each other. It probably like changes my expectations of what I'm reading. Like if I've read something really good, then I might judge the next books I read more harsh and vice versa. But yeah, I don't know if I've really had this book hangover that people have talked about. And then the last question, number 7, is tell us about a few books that always work for you, something that might have remained a favorite throughout your life despite any changing reading taste, something that always seems to hit just the right spot when you need a lift, or perhaps some lifetime book hangover where the text will always be at the back of your mind. I am someone that, if we're talking about specific books I love, I am someone that I rarely reread. I will sometimes, but it's generally not something that I go back to just because there's so many books in the world I want to read. I think I have certain authors I know that, like, generally speaking, their works will probably work for me. Joyce Carol Oates still remains one of my favorites after all these years. Again, that is more of her older work, though, not so much her newer stuff. Anything that is well written, deals with like multiple thematic issues, anything that really makes you feel less alone. But again, all of this is so subjective, so it's hard for me to like really pinpoint and say what works for me specifically and what doesn't. Any book that is like exploring the self and seeks to help me to expand my knowledge of being human in the world will always, and if it's well written, will always work for me. I don't know if that made sense. I feel like I just kind of rambled, but I got kind of tripped up on this question. So yeah. And then the last question is not a question. It just says tag some people. So I will tag some people. And yeah, that's it. I plan on making more videos soon. I still have to do my February wrap up. And I plan on trying to get back into making videos again. Just didn't mean to not upload for a month. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think or what your answers would be to any of these questions. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.